Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and we have reached the point of the NFL offseason where you're going, where's all the news? What's going on here? Adam Schefter, come back. Pelissero, Rappaport, send me something. Tell me something's going on. But for now, it's quieted down significantly, let's say, to the point where the main storyline today is Cam Ward throwing at his pro day, and one of the reporters from Tennessee saying, yeah, interesting that Tennessee sent their entire crew of entertainment people also to this pro day, along with their executives, their head coach. Everybody is there, and it seems that Tennessee is more or less locking themselves in to drafting Cam Ward. I didn't pay much attention to it last year. I was all about the pro day on NFL Network. I was watching McCarthy's and Bo Nix and Michael Penix and everybody when they were broadcasting it. And this year's draft will be a lot different for us now because there's a lot more players I have to prepare for. That's for sure. Last year, I didn't really prepare for the fact that they could draft Dallas Turner. We all thought that they were going to use the second draft pick to trade up, or that for a quarterback, or that Dallas Turner was already going to be off the board. But now I feel like this year it's so much more unpredictable for the Vikings in draft land. So we'll definitely talk about that. And questions, comments. What I'm saying by telling you there's not a whole lot of news is participation is welcome, everyone. Jump into the comments, to the chat, ask questions, give hot takes. Draft, looking back at free agency, what's next? We are going to hear from the general manager this week, and then the owners' meetings will be next week. So there will be a lot to break down from the brass about what they have to say about this free agency period. Maybe they'll answer some questions about chasing Rodgers. Maybe we'll get some clarity about the general manager's situation with his contract, all those questions that we've been answering. But until then, I've got time. So what are you thinking about? And I'll let you throw the questions and comments in the chat. And I did put together from ESPN's article of grading every move now that we more or less have the Vikings offseason complete, or at least we think they could still make some surprise move that we all go, whoa, never saw that coming. That's what they were going to do with all that cap space, right? I mean, we could, but I don't think so. I think this is your 2025 Vikings, except for whoever is going to be a draft pick. So what do we think of that? If this is it, what do we think about where they stand? And I'll tell you how ESPN has graded the Vikings moves, but I'll give you a warning first. They didn't really love a lot of these moves. And so I'll talk about each one individually. I've got up here what they had to say about each one of these moves and why maybe we might view it a little bit differently than somebody from the outside, because we have a little more context to it, or maybe they have some fair points. So we'll start off. These are ESPN's grades for Vikings free agents. So we'll start off. They gave Byron Murphy Jr.'s re-signing a C+. And I think that with Byron Murphy Jr., I understand why you might look at it like this. So here's the write-up on ESPN. And they had a bunch of different people write up on these. Seth Walder was one of them. Really good analytics guy over at ESPN. At the bottom here is, quote, I think the price is a little high. I would rather have DJ Reed or Charvarius Ward than Murphy, yet both signed cheaper contracts. Plus, while Murphy's nearest defender numbers have been consistent, they aren't amazing. So there's a few things to break down from that. I mean, first of all, it's hard to put a dollar figure on what Byron Murphy Jr. means in terms of chemistry and the fact that he is such a really good fit for the Vikings defense. I mean, if Brian Flores tells me I want Byron Murphy Jr., that's my guy. He understands my defense. I can ask him to do a lot of different things. He has flexibility. He has intelligence. He has toughness. He has consistency. He has all these things. And Brian Flores says, I want him. I'm like, okay, well, that all makes sense to me. And that's what they showed by signing Byron Murphy. The misnomer is that they paid more. They did not pay more. That's not actually true. When you look at the real contract, when you look at the per year that was put out by Byron Murphy's agent, okay, yes, they paid more. But when you actually go to overthecap.com and you take a look, even just look at what it says for average annual value, he could earn up to $22 million per year, but it's not $22 million a year. In fact, it is right on 18 million average annual value with Charvarius Ward and is 2 million more than DJ Reed. But when you look at the actual guaranteed money, it's around 35 million, which is just about the same as all these other corners. So the Vikings decided to go with their guy who they know, who they love his fit in their defense, who also led all cornerbacks in interceptions last year, which I know will be tough to repeat. But all of that to me is a little more context with this move that goes beyond. And look, I brought up DJ Reed, and I also thought, are they really going to spend big time money on Byron Murphy versus a Reed or a Charvarius Ward, who are more of those one-on-one corners, which I think is always going to get a little more attention, a little more love from people if you can be that shutdown guy. And I also have just a general uneasiness about analytics that point to the closest defender type of stuff, which, I will cite these stats sometimes, but in a Brian Flores defense, it could be a little more tricky because sometimes, so I'll give you a stat with Byron Murphy. Like the average completion into Byron Murphy's coverage is much shorter than a lot of corners, like because a lot of the stuff is in front of him and they're throwing based on blitzes and they're throwing in front of Byron Murphy. Then they make the tackle, they rally, they don't give up big plays. And yes, the numbers will go against Byron Murphy on that because he's the nearest defender. But if you're getting the ball out of the quarterback's hands on a blitz really quickly and he's making the tackle, you're not really saying, oh, well, Byron Murphy got smoked on that or gave up a big play. So there's all sorts of layers to these cornerback statistics. I had a conversation with someone very high in a position with the Vikings about cornerback stats one time and about how difficult they are to look at. NFL Next Gen's got its version. PFF has theirs. PFF's, of course, is better because it's an actual person watching it, not just dots, to be able to give the grade on this. Now, Murphy was graded as a top 20 corner, and I think he got paid like a top 20 corner. So when you keep the band together of a top 5 defense, you keep someone that Brian Flores really wants, you keep someone who's a playmaker, and not at the price that was reported at the beginning, I would go higher than this. I would not have this as a mediocre move. I think this is actually a really important move to the Vikings offseason. And I think they probably valued his ability to play in this defense over a DJ Reed's shutdown ability because the NFL is just playing so much more zone than it ever has before. So they did not love that one, but also didn't hate it. They did hate a move. They hated at ESPN the Jonathan Allen move. Now I'll get the explanation for this. I got to search it. Okay. The Jonathan Allen move was graded a D+ by ESPN. And I will read what it says here. It says, I don't love giving Allen $20 million per year, although we haven't seen the guarantees yet. So this was written before the guarantees came out. And of course, you'll never believe this, it wasn't $20 million a year. Allen missed 9 games with a torn pec, returning in December. His play also dropped off after recording 16.5 sacks and reaching the Pro Bowl twice over 2021 and 2022. Allen has just 8.5 regular season sacks over the past 2 years, albeit only in 24 games. Not just the sacks, he was a top 10 pass rush win rate defensive tackle, and he had an 8% win rate as a defensive tackle, below average for his position last year. And his playing time dipped as well. So the point that is being made is that for the money that they paid Jonathan Allen, the statistics were not matching up with that. And now in this case, I would agree with that concern. Now, when you cite the average annual value, once again, like the flags go up for me, like that's not what that contract really is. It's much more of a 2-year contract. But at the same time, and just if you're just joining, these are ESPN's grades, not my grades on these signings. So I'll just compare what I would give them. The Byron Murphy one, I would give it more of a B+ than I would give a C+. With Jonathan Allen, here's the way I look at this. because some of his statistics have notably slipped. And there's no doubt about it that 21-22, he was one of the premier players at his position. But last year, by pass rush win rate by PFF, which is a little bit different from the next gen stats that ESPN is using, he was still not one of the elite pass rushers. But then you watch what happened in the playoffs against Jared Goff when he had 7 pressures, and you go, okay, I think that player might be still there, and battling the injury would have been a factor last year. But in terms of this one, I look at it has the potential to be a D plus. If Jonathan Allen does not go back to what he had been and continue to produce pressure at an extremely high rate, then it won't be worth what they gave him. And it will not be this defense changing defensive tackle move that we've all been asking for. But at the same time, last year, he only played something like 400 snaps and had 26 pressures. Jihad Ward was the Vikings' best interior rusher with 31 pressures last year, and the next best had like 17. So even half a season of Jonathan Allen, he produced way more, and his pass rush grade from PFF over the last 2 years has still been above average. It's still been good. His run defense grade has gone down, and that could be how they play, or I'm not sure, because Javon Hargraves has dropped as well. And he's always been a good run defender, but he changed teams. So sometimes they change how they play. I want to give more of a range on a Jonathan Allen. I mean, that's not what they're doing on ESPN with these grades. So I get it. But for me, it has the potential, if he plays at the same level that he played last year in a small sample size, it has the potential to be a signing that does not work out for the dollar figure that they gave him. And it has red flags on it, and it has risk on it. Now, it also has the potential to be a great signing. This one is their most risky deal that they gave out, because Allen's high end, as we've seen in the past when the Vikings have played against him, you've seen him on a number of big games, including against Detroit in the divisional round. When he has a great game, he is impossible to stop. But if he does slide, and he is 30 years old, and that's always a concern, if he does slide and his production is similar to what it was last year in pass rush win rate and in pressures and sacks, then paying him even the dollars that they are, which is a really low cap hit this year and a much bigger cap hit next year that's hard to get out of. And then after that, it's really a 2-year deal. And that's another factor too, is that if the ESPN is probably grading this on it being a 3-year contract, it is absolutely not, because all of his guarantees more or less run out after 2 years. And that's what it really is. So for a 2-year deal for a 30-year-old who's been crazy productive in the recent past, but has also had an injury and has also seen some of his key stats go down, a lot of risk reward there. What you're banking on is that the Vikings have 2 of the best edge players in the NFL. They have the mad scientist defensive coordinator, and that they're going to be able to give him a lot around him with Harrison Phillips and with Javon Hargrave and other people rotating in, that he will not have to play 800 snaps to get the type of production that you're looking for from Jonathan Allen. But that grade is pretty harsh, and I think that it's also got some justification to it. I don't think they were just being haters on this one. I think that there is a low end of this deal that ends up not working out based on some of the red flag numbers. And if it goes back to where it was, this could end up being an A signing. So to me, it ranges the entire scale, because we have seen this guy play at a Pro Bowl level over the years and be one of the most dominant players. That's not who he most recently was, with that pec injury. And then even before that, and going back to 2023, it still was not at the same level that it was in 2021 and 2022. Context matters. Who you've got playing alongside you matters. They were playing Jalen Holmes. Remember Jalen Holmes? A guy that could kind of barely make the Vikings team, and he was playing actual reps there on the Washington D-line. This is going to be a little bit different. So they are banking on the circumstances helping out Jonathan Allen and being able to get the most out of him. But that's a tough grade. That's a harsh grade. All right, on to the next one. Again, these are ESPN's grades, and I'm comparing my own thoughts to them. So ESPN gave the Will Fries deal a C. Don't you love this sexy graphic I made? It just says Will Fries C, but that's ESPN's grade for the Will Fries signing. And I will pull up what they said about Will Fries. Again, part of it is that, their the contract numbers are very high when you first look at them. 5 years, $88 million. And a 5-year contract is pretty attractive here. But after 2 years, the Vikings have an option with him where bonus money kicks in. And if they want to move on, they can I think it is bonus money or guaranteed money kicks in for Will Fries. So as always, the little asterisk, it's not what you think it is. And it does have big cap hits though after the first year. So they made a big investment in Will Fries, and there is absolutely a chance that he ends up playing a very long time for the Minnesota Vikings. So here is what ESPN wrote. I would still rather find a cheaper short-term stopgap at guard, but given Fry's age, there's at least upside if he continues to ascend. So that's also the thing about giving Will Fries and that move a C, is that it's another bet by the Vikings that he's going to take what he started to build on in 2024 and ascend. But also you have to weigh in the price tag and the fact that you can have him over many years. The Vikings, if they went out and got a Kevin Zeitler, which I like the idea, or a Brandon Scherf, which I like the idea, you're replacing your guard next year once again. I think what they were looking for is to get somebody that they can have over multiple years. And I mentioned the contract detail, and that might mean that if they don't love what they've seen, they can move on, or if they do love what they've seen, they could redo the deal or whatever it might be, or just have a good deal for a right guard for 5 years. But I think that's a main element of this is if you pay $18 million a year or whatever this works out to, 17.8 or something, if you pay $18 million a year right now for the top guard on the market, which the Vikings did in Will Fries, once Trey Smith was off, they went and got the best guard on the market. You can look at that and go, wow, that is a lot, because that guy does not have the hugest sample size of playing great. He was really good in 2023. He was a second tier type of guard in 2023. And then last year through 5 games, he was a first tier type of guard, which I don't expect over 17 games. I mean, I think that Fries has some weaknesses in his game and he's not going to just be a megastar. But if his range of outcomes since he became a starter is runs of being really great or a full season of being pretty good, like that's worth paying a lot for in the NFL right now, because it's so hard to replace these guys. And I liked the idea of a short-term type of deal with a Zeitler for $9 million. I don't even think Brandon Scherf has a job yet, but those guys are 34, 35 years old and have a lot of mileage on their body. Fries is 27. He's coming off an injury, but he's 27 years old. And you can build an entire offensive line with him over the years. So let's say they draft Gray Zabel, and then they have O'Neal, Darisaw, Fries, Zabel, and then maybe Zabel moves to center or something, or they develop Michael Juergens over the next few years, or get a lot out of Ryan Kelly. You're looking at some potential continuity here to build on. And 3 years from now, what will the top guard be making in free agency? Well, he's under contract for 5 as of right now. And there is that hold up after 2 years, which gives the Vikings some options. But that has to be weighed into this, that we're talking about a player in his prime who is improving from the last couple of seasons, who will be under contract potentially for a long time. So I would have given Fries a higher grade than this, but I also understand that if they're looking at it and saying, well, he's only on the second type of tier and you're overpaying, but of course you're overpaying when there's like 3 guards. I mean, that has to be, to me, talked about when you give a grade to a signing. You can't just go, well, his production, it's not an A+ for that dollar. All right, but you're a desperate team for a guard, and he's the best one out there, and you got the best one at a price that was less than another guy who is, to me, significantly worse in Aaron Banks than Will Fries. So again, a little bit harsh on that one from ESPN, but I get it because if you're just weighing here's his pure production and here's his dollar figure, that they don't quite match up, but you have to look at what the market is and what the years and the term are on this type of deal. And the fact that if you bring in Zeitler and he plays okay for you this year or potentially good, that you got to go get somebody else. I mean, he might just retire and then you have to do this again. And guess what? There ain't going to be more guards next year. So I think this is one where just like a Blake Cashman or just like a Jonathan Grenard, if you can catch a player on the upswing, you have, I think, a good chance to hit a home run on a deal. And it doesn't always work that way. But if you can catch a player while they're still improving and ascending, like Will Fries, who built on his first year as a starter that was really good, and then gets better and better as he goes forward. That's what they are making a bet on. But again, there's a range here. This could be a C signing. It absolutely could be a C signing. If every player has a pie chart of outcomes, like there's one outcome where Will Fries is just okay and he's not a game changer for the offensive line and you paid a lot for him and you feel like, okay, meh, C. On to the next one, which is Javon Hargrave. This one, there's not a lot to say about. Okay. Not popping up on my screen. Okay, well, let me throw up Jordan Mason. I don't know why hold on. Javon Hargrave. Why that one wasn't popping up. Okay, well, we can, there it is. Here it is. Okay, there we go. Javon Hargrave. And then we'll talk about Jordan Mason. Sorry, I revealed ESPN's grade for Jordan Mason. This is the most like meh type of grade and write up like, oh, well, they didn't spend a lot of money and Hargrave it has been pretty good. And that's that. I would also give this similar to like a B type of signing. But my thing is with Hargrave, if he bounces back to what he was 2 years ago before the injury, it could be more than that. But even if he is just a solid contributor, that's the thing about a deal for someone like Hargrave. Even if he's just a solid contributor and he gets 35, 40 pressures and a handful of sacks, that is way better than what they've had. And the investment is pretty significant in year 2 with that salary cap hit. This is another reason why I have a little trepidation about some of these deals. Not a ton, because they can restructure, they can create cap space, they can extend players for next year. But if somebody doesn't play well, if Hargrave gets hurt again or does not play well, and at 32, you never really know. I mean, we always estimate the best possible outcome on the day these guys sign. Wow, they've got the best thing, right? But we know, again, pie chart of outcomes, there's always one outcome where Javon Hargrave just doesn't play that well. And then they can't really get out of it without any pain. They can move on from him and essentially split the deal. So it would end up like 10 million dead cap, 10 million cap space. It's not really what you want if you have to move on from him. There's risk involved in that as well. So that one was, I think, less viewed as less of an investment from ESPN because it's a shorter deal and it's only 30 million. But for next year's salary cap, if it goes badly, then they will get hit there. I think that it's a safe bet, though, based on his career. He's been a very, very good player through his career, sometimes an elite player in the NFL. All right, I accidentally threw the Jordan Mason one up there, a B- from Jordan Mason. Again, kind of a meh grade. But the thing about Jordan Mason, the reason I would like to give it higher than that is also to do with the context. The number one, the context of being able to pair him with Aaron Jones is tremendous. So he doesn't have to be your entire offense. He doesn't have to be your entire running game. He is maybe an answer for the future for that, but to pair those two together very similarly to what Green Bay did with AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones for a long time and had great running games. And I think Mason is probably better than AJ Dillon. That is sort of a final piece to a running game that they've improved with the move for Ryan Kelly and for Will Fries. Did I miss their write-up on Ryan Kelly? I gotta look. I did not see a write-up from ESPN on Ryan Kelly. They said they graded every move, but they missed one, maybe, or my search function's not working right. So also when you look at the other options for Jordan Mason in the backfield for the Vikings, drafting one sounds great, but also somebody said the other day, I don't know, was it Daniel Jeremiah or Mel Kiper? Somebody said that they counted 31 draftable running backs. 31. So maybe undrafted free agency or maybe the late rounds is a place to grab one of those guys. But going out and getting Jordan Mason allows them not to have to spend a high draft pick on a running back to pair with Aaron Jones. And when we look at the rest of the league, Najee Harris signed a pretty reasonable deal. He's okay. I think he would have been all right in this role, but it's more than Jordan Mason. And Mason was better last year, wasn't even really close. And Rico Dowdle had 1,000 yards and he signed a pretty reasonable contract with the Carolina Panthers. That would have been fine, but Jordan Mason's better than him too. So I like this more because the other options were so weak and they gave up hardly anything. They paid him hardly anything. And now they have a thunder and lightning type of pair in the backfield. So I liked the Jordan Mason move kind of a lot. I would have given it more like an A minus. And the highest grade that they gave a Vikings move was trading Ed Ingram, B plus. They liked that as much as you guys did. That was a good trade. And then to turn around and use that for Jordan Mason. So there were ESPN analysts in this article, which you can see at ESPN.com. There were analysts that liked what the Vikings did and thought that they shored up a lot of weaknesses. I feel the same way. I have spent some time over the last few days thinking about something Clay, the intern, asked me about the alternative universe of like, how could this have been different? And there's a lot of different ways that they could have spent their money. They could have tried to get more players who are on the younger side rather than getting two older defensive tackles. Maybe they could have outbid everybody for Mason Williams. It sounded like Mason Williams just literally went to the highest bidder. So maybe they could have done that. But that to me carried a lot of risk as well with someone who has not played more than 500 snaps and giving them $26 million a year. If the Vikings topped that, it would have, 27. You're really talking about a huge investment in one guy. So maybe spreading out the risk with older players, potentially planning to draft one. Like there's a lot of different ways this could have gone. And we're going to think about that for a long time, depending on the outcomes here, because it does create, and this was a question the other day from the fans only questions that people email in, like, did they kind of create themselves a 2-year window here? I don't think so, because these aren't players that they signed other than Byron Murphy and Will Fries to be locked in for a long time to drive the success of the team. A lot of them are just complementary pieces at a fairly high price that the Vikings can afford. So I like it from that perspective, but I also see where if you were grading from the outside with a little less context and without all the contract details, where you might go, that guy has not played as well lately, or that guy's coming off an injury, or that guy, maybe got a little too much versus what some other players did in the market. So I think that these are mostly fair, but some of them are a little more on the like worst case scenario is that Jonathan Allen plays like he did last year. But best case scenario is that he's totally worth it. So you can give me your reactions to those along with your questions, comments, thoughts, and we will continue the conversation. And if I were to grade the Ryan Kelly deal, I think I would have probably gone like a B, because I can totally understand it where you have to improve your pass protection. You have to. And his leadership capabilities are very clear from us having one conversation with him. All right, this guy's the man on the offensive line, and he's going to be great to pair with JJ McCarthy with all of his experience. But the injury risk is very concerning. So a lot of them come along with these bands of, if it's all the way to the best case scenario, wow, is it good? But if it's all the way to the worst case scenario, holy cow. Like, I mean, anything can blow up, but like we will say, if they go to the worst case scenario, we will say, hey, that was one where you could have seen coming because you got a guy that had a previous injury history. So there's a lot of boom or bust potential with this free agent group. Overall, I think it made them a better team, a much better team in the most important areas. But I also get it why some of those grades what they were what they were. All right, let's start off with Edwin. Says Tannehill. Sure. All right. Sounds good to me. I mean, I'm sure that Ryan Tannehill could still throw it. And for a backup quarterback, got no problem with that. He could step in. He could throw to Justin Jefferson. The last time he got to play with good wide receivers, he was really good and won 12 games, right? Wasn't that the year he won 12 games? With a lot of talent around Ryan Tannehill, I'm sure that he could keep them at 500 if he had to play. Um, and beyond that, any of the options work for me at the moment. If I was ranking them, though, I probably would put Tannehill at the top. I didn't like what I saw from Joe Flacco last year. I thought there's no gas left in that tank. He used all of it in that little burst with Cleveland. There's nothing left there. And Drew Lock, like, okay, it's all right, I guess. I mean, Drew Lock can be a lot of fun and he can have some good games. There's a few other options. Carson Wentz is okay with me. Played for the Rams, might understand the system, could definitely come in and play, but not somebody I'd want for a long season, something like that. Skywalking McCarthy. I don't trust any of the DTs day one after Mason Graham. Should we wait on DT until day 2 or 3? Um, I mean, I think that there's a couple of guys that I would say are pretty quality prospects. I mean, how did we go from this is the greatest defensive tackle draft you're ever going to see to you're not trusting any of the guys? Because I continue to see super high grades from draft analysts on Derek Harmon, on Walter Nolan. Daniel mentions Derek Harmon. Daniel says the Vikings have Harmon high on their board. No one's seen their board, so we don't actually know that. We've just heard that Derek Harmon was an impressive prospect, and we could put 2 and 2 together. So if the Vikings were to bring him in, he fits a lot of the things that I like for that position for the Vikings. But anybody who's saying where somebody is on their board, you can't believe them because they haven't seen the board. I promise you, they have not been told who's on the board. I also promise you that. I've said this a million times. No one ever believes me because we love rumors and stuff and we love reports and everything. The teams don't tell anybody what they're doing. They do not. And I'll enjoy this year doing the same thing I did last year, which is going to Pro Football Rumors and going through all the reports that didn't come true. It's just, we don't know. I It was kind of one of those things at the combine where a few of us heard that Derek Harmon impressed. That's really all, though. As far as high on somebody's board, we don't know. But getting back to your original question, I really do like these defensive tackles in the first round. I like Walter Nolan. I like Derek Harmon as guys who are penetrating defensive tackles, who can rack up sacks, rack up pressures, develop behind Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen, and be long-term options. I mentioned this, but you look at the defensive tackles in the league. If you hit on a first or second round defensive tackle, they get paid a ton, but they usually don't leave their teams. They're usually with their teams forever. That's what you're looking for. You'd like a guy who comes in at 22 years old or 23 years old, and he's with you until he's 33 years old. And every single year, it's such a consistent position. Every single year you go into it going, okay, well, Derek Harmon or Walter Nolan or whoever, this guy's going to be a beast. You could just write that down. It's one of the most consistent positions. That's what I like about it. There might not be 5 defensive tackles in the first round, but there's at least 3 or 4. Kenneth Grant is one of them. That I'm not entirely sure on because he doesn't get after the passer. And I would just prefer that they only draft someone who can get sacks and pressures. You can find Jonathan Bullard. Like Jonathan Bullard was great for them last year. What did he cost? $2 million? Like that's what a run stuffer costs. I much prefer somebody who gets into the backfield and can make plays on the quarterback. But those guys are there. I do think there's a drop off. There's like Graham. There's a second tier that could be drafted in the first. And then it's a lot of run stuffers after that. Kerpluppy says, I've been thinking about the success of JJ McCarthy. I feel his success is reliant on KOC being disciplined enough to not ask him to throw 30 times a game. Run game, play calling needs love. Well, here's what we know about Kevin O'Connell is that he's always going to put it on the quarterback's shoulders. I wouldn't be afraid of that because if you draft a guy in the top 10 that you want him to be that guy, you want him to be your franchise quarterback who can operate the offense and throw 30 times a game. That's the league, right? But to your point, if you look at the first 5 games, the way that they handled Sam Darnold, it was a lot of run on first down. Now they were ahead in those games. That matters. But it was a lot of run and play action with Sam Darnold. It was a lot of, I mean, that Giants game, I remember coming out of the Giants game doing the post game podcast saying, they played that about as safe as you can play it and good. Like that's what you should do with Sam Darnold. And then it opened up as it went along. That's what I would like to see with JJ McCarthy as well, where you are establishing a running game. You are having a little more like short passing game. I think Rondale Moore shows you that at least they want to have that. I saw a chart the other day on Twitter where somebody was just tracking the amount of short or quick game. Maybe it was the ball coming out in a certain amount of time. I only just sort of scrolled by it, but that Sam Darnold was like last in quick game for the amount that his throws that were quick. We know that, and that's got to change. And the success at the goal line with Jordan Mason and now the rebuilt interior line, that's got to change. Like they do have to take a different approach. So I agree with you there. And it's like identifying the problem is the first step toward a solution. Well, identifying the problem and then actually taking a step toward that solution. So we've identified the problem several times throughout the last few years. Well, we need to run the ball better. We've heard that. Interior offensive line needs to be better. We know that. But they actually did it this time. And then, well, quick game does need to be better, or at least there needs to be a playmaker back there. Rondale Moore might be the first step. I think they could still do more at that position as well. But I mean, overall, I agree with you. The offense being tailored differently to Sam Darnold than it was Kirk Cousins should give you confidence. Like, don't worry about the Josh Dobbs thing. I mean, I don't know. Were they supposed to go from the least mobile quarterback in the league to a guy who his major specialty was running and just flip the offense on his head? I think that would have been hard. I've kind of erased all of that from any analysis because it's just bad backup quarterbacks. But when you look at what they did with Kirk, what they did with Darnold, it was different. But where you can use 2023 is Nick Mullins was still hucking it all over the yard. If you play quarterback for Kevin O'Connell, you better be ready to throw it. And he should be, but not right away. Maybe the first half of the season, you're taking it a little bit safer. And then you hope if you're the Vikings that the restrictor plate can come off and you can run the whole offense like they did late in the season. Ben says, with the moves specifically along the offensive line and backfield, how do you see them getting tailored to JJ? Should we see more play action? Will we see less deep shot hunting like Sam did? So, Seth Walder messaged me and said, enjoyed the breakdown. Thank you, Seth. Thank you. Seth Walder from ESPN. Sorry, my only apologies. I don't know if, Seth, you're going to have to tell me if you wrote all of the write-ups or if it was like a cumulative effort. Because I saw Seth tweet it and that's where I picked it up. But thank you for that. I did think it was a good breakdown, but I also think that there's ranges. And if you're doing the article, you can only give one grade. But I think there's ranges on those things. Anyway, so as far as it's a similar question with Ben about tailoring the offense to JJ McCarthy. And I think that what you're identifying there, will they deep shot hunt less? Yes. They're two different players. Now, McCarthy could throw the ball down the field, but I mean, Sam Darnold over 7 years in the NFL had clearly improved greatly on his accuracy downfield and his timing and his anticipation. It does take some time for somebody like JJ McCarthy, who just hasn't thrown a lot of passes, to be as sharp and throw with anticipation and hit the back foot every time and have the timing be perfect and things like that. That's going to take a little more time. I also noticed last year in training camp, I think JJ McCarthy, where he's very strong, is in the middle of the field. I think he sees the middle of the field well, processes it well, and a lot of his successful passes as a Michigan quarterback were crossing routes, guys coming across the middle, him finding them. And that same thing happened in the preseason game. We remember those deep shots down the sideline to wide open Trent Sherfield or Tristan Jackson, who the Raiders just completely failed to cover. But there were a few impressive plays that were just over the middle, just crossing routes that maybe he gets to a second, third read and then finds someone. He was doing that at a higher level than Sam Darnold in camp last year with the over the middle stuff specifically, which I think Kevin O'Connell has probably taken note of and they'll do more of. So underneath crossing route type stuff, slant type stuff. I know O'Connell doesn't love that. He would prefer to go deep all the time, but I think that, yeah, I think it will be tailored in that way, but more play action. They did run a lot of play action last year for Sam Darnold. They had a pretty high percentage for Sam Darnold. So I think they'll do that again. And I think they'll run on first down again. John says the cap will go up, 15 to 20 million next year. I would assume so, that it will be every single year. So that will play a role in some of those cap hits. Restructures will play a role in some of those cap hits. And I also think rolling over their cap space is why they're keeping some for right now, that they can roll it over. They'll be okay cap wise. I mean, they've filled so many starting spots for the next 2 seasons. And I think next year they'll go in with the mentality of maybe hunting one big fish rather than trying to fill all these different spots that they've had to fill because they have not hit on draft picks. But it'll be more of adding maybe one player on a big deal and then restructuring or doing what you have to do to work around it. But this is kind of your team for the next 2 seasons. And yeah, there's a lot of bets there. I mean, that's what we went through in the grades. There's a lot of bets there. Not Now says, is there a blue chip running back available with their first pick? I don't think there's someone worth spending the 24th pick on. Omarion Hampton is a really great athlete. There's a bunch of other guys. I really like Travion Henderson's fit with the Vikings. Quinshon Judkins has a heck of an athletic profile and he's got power. But are those guys worth the 24th pick? No, I don't think so. Not in a draft like this. In a draft like this, you could probably wait till the 5th round, take someone that your long-term plan over the next few years is to have as a role player, someone who could come in if Aaron Jones gets banged up. I think you got to have 3 running backs on this team that you can trust, because Aaron Jones, he survived all of last year, but you just never know with running backs. Both these guys have some injury history. Jordan Mason missed from week 13 on last year. So you're always getting running backs banged up. They don't trust Ty Chandler, so they should look for somebody. But in a draft with this many guys, I mean, you get into the Damian Martinez range of, this guy's supposed to go in the 5th round, and then you watch him play and you're like, that guy's supposed to go in the 5th round. There's just a bunch of running backs. The running back is not dead. That's for sure. Edwin says the Vikings were supposed to win 6.5 games over under last year too. Well, that was a Vegas thing, not an ESPN thing. But most of the prognosticators did not like where the Vikings were going to land last year. And part of the reason, of course, is Sam Darnold, but it was also a lot of free agent bets as well. And every single one of those bets hit for the Vikings last year. It's a rare situation where every one of them hit the best case scenario. Every single player. Stephon Gilmore was the best case scenario. Cashman, Van Ginkel, and Sam freaking Darnold, by far a better case scenario than any of us ever could have predicted to win 14 games. Although Justin Jefferson, that was my argument for last year. It's like, hey, I don't think a team that's coached this well and has Justin Jefferson's winning 6 games. If they do, and I wrote this last year, if they do, then they've got a problem. If they can't get over 6 games, even with bad quarterback play, because the previous year they got to 7 with half a season of Kirk and then Dobbs and Jaron Hall and Mullins. So, Max says, after Rodgers, let's get to the real questions. Are we worried about Will the Thrill? That's the real questions, Max. Hey, that's a good question. You know what? That has not been asked this year. That has not been asked this year about Will the Thrill. Will Reichert, I think, will be fine. There is some concern there if he has an injury. And I think last year, at least the sense that I got from what he said to Mark Craig, I think at the Star Tribune, about feeling something in practice and then going out and kicking anyway. And They had another kicker on the roster. They could have sat out a week and maybe let it heal, and instead he hurt himself. That's a little concerning. Percentage wise, he was fine overall, but kickers, asking me to solve kickers, who knows? He is the most talented kicker I've ever seen in my life. Truly. From watching, I don't know how many practices with kickers. I've seen a million, and he's number one for most talented in practice. And then he came out in the regular season and just, well, how many in a row did he hit? Hitting from distance with plenty of room to spare. And he's got a ton of talent, and I think he has a good mindset. It really is, I think, the physical nature. It's just, is he going to be able to stay healthy after this injury? And if he is banged up, is he going to actually tell someone and sit out a game or two to make sure that he's healthy? Right. So, yeah, it's not a huge concern, but like what happened last year might be a little bit like, make sure you have another kicker just in case that injury continues to pop up, because I think it was something that he dealt with in college. How about that? First day we talked about the kicker of the offseason, March 24th. Anthony says, bet they graded Van Ginkel low. Love to see their grades for what turned out to be a great free agency period from last year. That's an interesting question. I wonder if we could look that up. I wonder if we can see. Can we get 2024? Can we go old takes exposed? Not seeing. Let's see. Well, maybe we got something here. 2024. Okay. All right. Okay. We got something here. Let's see. You said Van Ginkel. Let's see. Okay. They gave Van Ginkel a B last year. All right. That makes sense. I mean, who would have though, to be fair, would you have guessed second team all pro? I mean, multiple pick sixes, double digit sacks for a guy who had never had double digit sacks before, but they were not down on that move. How about Grenard? Jonathan Grenard was a B plus. Oh wait, no, that's Danielle Hunter. They just mentioned Grenard. Let me see. Okay, Grenard was an A. Okay, so yeah, see, you're calling out their grades, but looks like they liked it. They love the Jonathan Grenard deal. That one got an A. And I don't see a grade on Blake Cashman. So seems like they liked it last year. Look, I get it. When it's a 30 or 32-year-old player, but especially a 30-year-old player who has not played his best football recently, and you give him a big contract, and the write-up was done before the contract details came out, so that was important. But when you give them a big contract and multi-years of commitment at 30 years old with an injury, you're not going to give it a great grade. You're going to say, if you're analyzing this from a analytical perspective, which is what Seth Walder and ESPN do for this particular article, you're not going to say, wow, what a great move. My point on that is, I agree with it. Like, I agree with that logic, but I also think, man, the way that this guy might fit in, if he gives them 40 pressures, 45 pressures to this defense that was top 5, like that could be absolutely worth it. And it has a range of outcomes that could be tremendous, but there's a lot of risk there. So I get it, but no, yeah, they like the moves from last year. They definitely did. Alex says the way too early power rankings are doing the Vikings dirty. Yeah. I mean, but how would you do it? This is the point. If you were on the outside and you were looking at this, and now I watched JJ McCarthy last year in training camp, I was very impressed. And there have been quarterbacks in the past who I have not been impressed by. Trust me. I saw Kellen Mond starting in the UFL, and I hope he succeeds because he's a really nice guy, but that was very bad to watch in practice. So I've given you that information. You guys have seen him play the preseason game. You're excited about the rookie quarterback. You buy into him. The fact that the Vikings and KOC did not bring in Rodgers, did not bring in Darnold is a data point that we can use to say how much they like McCarthy. So we can say it should be better than where the power rankings have them. And I think we could also say, like, hey, some of these moves were massive weaknesses and now they're not anymore. This is a big deal. But if you're looking at the other NFC North teams, I mean, it's so much easier to predict the Packers. It's so much easier to predict the Lions or Washington or the Eagles or the Rams because they're bringing back their quarterbacks. When you have this is why everybody was so down on the Vikings last offseason was because it was just impossible to predict what Darnold was going to be. His previous sample size was so poor. How, if you are setting a line, would you go, you know what? I think he's actually going to be incredible. Now, we've all seen this story before. We've seen Chris Carter and Randy Moss do this for people in the past. We've seen Justin Jefferson do it for people in the past, like, of course, Kirk, but also Nick Mullins and the way that he played with Justin Jefferson. So we knew that. And we had that, I think, in talking about where the expectation should be. I picked them to win 10 games last year because I figured, I mean, if Sam Darnold can even do anything, Justin Jefferson's going to make it right. But nobody ever would have predicted 14 games. But also, if every prediction, I mean, if it all went right, if we all knew the answers, if Vegas got it right every time, what fun would sports be? I've been trying over the last few days in the women's NCAA tournament to hit on pick'ems on underdog, and I've missed every single one. It's tough. It's tough to predict stuff, right? So you make a decision now, you think, well, this one's got a lot of risk, so we're going to lower that grade. Okay. I mean, that makes sense. I liked the Jordan Mason thing more because of the context, but if they were just bringing him in on a pure, like, just looking at that move, just for example, here's what you paid, here's what you got for Jordan Mason. It's basically a half a season of really good play. And maybe that looks like too much as compared to a Rico Dowdle for almost nothing. But when you think about how they're going to play, what they want to do with Jordan Mason, you can see, all right, that actually makes a lot of sense. So, Adam has got this right. So many of the Vikings had short seasons last year because of injuries, right? And when we're talking about health, uh, that's always something that is very difficult to predict. But if you're grading signings, you go, well, this guy didn't play, this guy didn't play, this guy didn't play. You're not going to give him higher numbers. Son of a Beaver said, with roughly 30 million in cap, who the heck are we waiting to sign in May? Well, that might be a backup quarterback, but it might be nobody. And this is what I was talking about the other night when we talked about, like, are they going to do something with this cap space? They might, but they also might just roll it over and help mitigate some of these cap hits from this year. They may have structured the big cap hits for next year. I mean, with this year's free agent class, they may have structured them in part so they could roll over cap and then get the cap increasing. So then it looks like right now, oh, they're like $10 million over the cap for next season. Well, if you roll over 20 million or whatever it is, after you sign your draft class, a backup quarterback, a handful of other players, and then you also get that 20, $30 million boost, now all of a sudden you're not over the cap as much as it looks like. Braun frickin' Solo, nice to see you. The team should be more solid, but the play of the quarterback will be the question mark. Kwesi betting on himself seems to be putting himself and the Vikings in a good spot for the future. Yeah, I mean, making the bet on JJ McCarthy and moving on from Darnold and not getting Aaron Rodgers is it is certainly the type of bet that if it doesn't work out, people will go back and go, oh, they let Darnold go after 14 wins or whatever, right? So you're going to get that. But when it comes along with being able to make risky signings, and this is why context is so important when we're grading every signing. It's like if one of these doesn't go right, it doesn't ruin the franchise. There have been years in the past where they've signed one guy in the offseason because their quarterback was making so much. And they would sign Delvin Tomlinson. It's like, or Michael Pierce. I used this as an example the other day. If that doesn't work out, like, they're in a lot of trouble with that one big signing they were able to make. But instead, they signed two defensive tackles. If one of them is good, okay, maybe you blew some cap space, but like you had the cap space. They spent all that and still have cap space left over. That's the point about the JJ McCarthy, and that's the bet that you have to make in letting Sam Darnold go, is that cap space will give you a lot of freedom to add that many players. And even if, like, take all those grades, add them all up and go, all right, so what if the whole class turns out to be a B? So some they liked, some they didn't like. What if it turns out to be a B? Well, if you have a B free agent class with that many players who come in and that's what they contribute, and they're not asked to be the franchise players like Jefferson, Darisaw, Grenard, etc., then you've done really well for yourself in terms of upgrading from last year, which is what they were trying to do. So you can be more risky in Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's spot. You can try to aim for a high-end Jonathan Allen and know that it might blow up in your face, but you go, well, that's okay, potentially, because you got Hargrave, you could draft one, and that wasn't all of your cap space in that one basket. So every team's moves are just different like ways of weighting the factors with the franchise. Hunter says, what's your opinion on drafting Quinn Ewers with the compensatory pick for the future backup quarterback? I do not like the idea of drafting anyone outside of a first round quarterback to be the starter. It's usually, here's what it is normally. It is taking the draft pick, pulling out a lighter, woof, and igniting the draft pick. Every once in a while, there's Tom Brady and there's Brock Purdy and Dak Prescott. Every once in a while. But I remember looking at this a few years ago when they drafted Kellen Mond, because of course everybody loved the idea of drafting Kellen Mond. And when you draft a quarterback, everyone loves them. Everyone loved Jaren Hall. Jaren Hall was not good, and it just wasn't. And neither was Kellen Mond. But I looked at how many guys had been drafted past the second round at any point and how many had succeeded. And I think I came up with maybe 3 or 4 guys in the last 15 years who had succeeded in any fashion. I think I looked at it since Kirk. Since Kirk came in with Russell Wilson, that year was crazy to have Wilson and Kirk. And I think it was 3 guys after that had actually been successful. I mean, I'm not spending a draft pick on a backup quarterback. There's 14 backup quarterbacks. How many backups have already signed and they're still available out there, even at this point? So I would not spend a draft pick on any other quarterback. Plus it just makes noise. I mean, the Packers did this once upon a time with Brian Braum, where they picked him while they still had Aaron Rodgers. That was weird. Mark says, saw some talk of Case Keenum. Haven't paid attention to Case last couple years. Any gas left in the tank? No, probably not. But every backup that you bring up, there's going to be I don't know, probably not. Ryan Tannehill wasn't in the league last year. And I'm like, sure. I mean, Carson Wentz hasn't started in years. And the last time he did, it was pretty much a disaster, but sure. What else do you got? I mean, look around the league. One of my favorite articles, I think NFL.com will do a backup quarterback ranking. And once you get past 4, it's a disaster. You wouldn't want any of those guys starting. There's not 64 human beings who could play quarterback in the NFL. No way. At a high level? Absolutely not. So, I mean, Case Keenum, if that's what they wanted to do, that's fine. I know that we always love the idea of bringing somebody back that was here before. We joked about that the other night of Brooks Bollinger or Todd Bauman or Spurgeon Wynn or whatever. Case is a great dude. There you go. Sure. But I don't think that Case could win at this point in his career. I don't think that he could win half of his games if he had to play. So just for example, if the Vikings started out 5-3 and you needed someone to keep the thing on the tracks for 5 games, could you win 3 out of 5 with Carson Wentz or Ryan Tannehill? I think the chances are better than Case Keenum. I don't think the chances are very high at this point in his career with Keenum, because those other guys were first round draft picks who are big, giant dudes who still have arms and could still huck it. I mean, we know this about Case. That's not him. As a leader, as a dude, yeah. They could also try to trade for somebody. I mean, that's the Nick Mullins point. They got Nick Mullins in the last, half of training camp. It was fine. Bron Frickett Solo says, did Wentz grow up in the Dakotas? If so, he is probably a Vikings fan. It would be a great bridge. I mean, I don't think it matters to Carson Wentz at this point who he's a fan of, probably, but I get where you're going with that. A local nonetheless. We count the Dakotas, I think, or at least parts of the Dakotas as being Minnesota. I think he's fine just from he's played in this kind of system before with the Rams as a backup, and he can be that guy who's a veteran, who's been through it, who's been a first round draft pick, who, when he was brought in, Sam Bradford was supposed to be the guy, and then they traded Sam Bradford out. He's got those experiences. That matters. So as long as he's comfortable with his role, Carson Wentz, which he clearly was from going to Kansas City last year, that he's comfortable with who he is as a backup now, yeah, it's fine. How much money he wants to be paid could be a thing, but I don't know. Mike says, in 2024, the Vikings agreed to terms with 17 post-draft UDFAs. Do you expect a similar path this year, having less draft capital? I don't know what they usually did in the past. It's always a lot. But what they did in the last few years with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is they've spent a lot to go get the top Gabe Murphy, Ivan Pace Jr. And yes, I do. I do expect that they will be one of the, if not the biggest spenders in undrafted free agency. And I also think that this draft, at least from my understanding, is that it's really deep, that it's not great at the high end, but it's really deep. And if you're the team that is spending in undrafted free agency, think about from the 5th round to the first 20 undrafted free agents. Just think about that. Like all that. I don't know if you've ever seen any of these videos. Like the Eagles put out a video where Howie Roseman was going through their meeting. And I think it goes this way around the league, going through their day 3 meeting. And Howie is saying to the scouts, who's your favorite guy? Who do you want on day 3? Okay, that's the guy you want on day 3. Okay, that's the guy you want on day 3. And then they just pick those guys. It's scouts day is day 3 and undrafted free agency. They're just going. So each team has their guys that they like. Okay, the Vikings scout love the kicker. So they got the kicker. And we all go, is that the most efficient usage of the 5th round? It's like, yeah, probably not. It's a 6th round pick. Like, just do that. But every team's doing it, which means some guys fall through the cracks if they weren't some scout's favorite. And if the Vikings can have the best situation, now they can say, hey, we played Gabe Murphy last year. We played Ivan Pace Jr. He became a star. Dwight McGlothern's got opportunity. Bring your UDFAs here. I heard this from an agent last year that he was calling the Vikings, like, get our guy there. Give our guy a chance, an undrafted free agent. That guy didn't make the team, but still, like this agent really badly wanted him in Minnesota because he thought there's no better chance than he's going to get there because that coaching staff doesn't care where you were drafted, especially Brian Flores does not care where you were drafted. So I think it is a hack to be the biggest spending team in undrafted free agency because you can't tell me there's a massive difference between the 14th pick in the 5th round and the first pick in undrafted free agency. There just can't be. Let's see. Good stuff from you guys tonight. Good stuff. I was thinking to myself, like, what do we got for today? You don't have a big news item, but you guys are coming up with some good stuff, including kicker talk. Mark, do you have a number in mind that would be the furthest you think the Vikings would trade back to? Good question. Picks 35 to 40. I still think we could get a starting caliber player. So having simulated the draft, and it's been suggested to me to use some different simulators, so I'll probably do that. I like PFFs because it's just so functional and I've always used it, but maybe I need to just adjust the sliders to get some different results sometimes. But when I use PFF, and they have their own draft board, so sometimes it does come out a little different and you can use the consensus one, whatever. We'll mix it up. What I end up with almost every time is a starting caliber player still being there 35 to 40. And historically, this is only my perception. This is not the draft studies that have always found, the 33rd pick has less of a chance than 32 and 34 has less of a chance. Right. That's how it goes. It goes straight down historically over 50 years of drafts. Right. But I think in recent years, you see a lot of quality caliber starting players, if not good players, taken in the early part of the 2nd round. But when you get to the back half of the 2nd round, it falls off pretty significantly. That's how I've viewed it. And if you can stay within those first 10 picks of the 2nd round and then get extra picks in the 3rd, the 4th in this draft, where I think there's going to be a lot of guys, I agree with you. I would not go past 40. If you go past 40, but I'm looking at like corners and seeing in mock drafts and things like that, Trey Amos, who I really, really like. I'm seeing him, Siobhan Ravel, who's got the injury but has a ton of talent. I'm seeing corners not going until the middle of the second round because there's a lot of defensive tackles and some other positions, running backs who you usually don't see in there. So, I mean, I wouldn't go past 40, but I think there is plenty of opportunity there to trade back and still end up. And I saw Barnwell wrote about that. The Vikings were the main picture of the trade back teams that need to trade back. Easier said than done, but I definitely think that they are a trade back team if you can find the right situation. And then we need to not like go through and like fight over did they get enough for it. Like that happened in 2022, but my issue in 2022 was 12. They were picking at 12. In the top 15 is superstars. And once you leave that top 15, there's not many. And even look at that draft. There's Trent McDuffie, and that's kind of it. Karlaftis is a good player, but that's kind of it. For stars past the top 15. And in the top 15, there's a lot of really great players. Once you leave I would not leave the top 15 if I had a top 15 pick in the NFL. Pretty much ever, unless someone was giving me crazy. But Kwesi basically admitted later that he was trying to chase a bunch of different future weaknesses with one draft, and that's kind of what happened. Kerpluppy says, how did they treat the Bears? I feel like we've got similar rebuilds, just minus a bunch of early round picks. Let's see. Well, I'm sure that the Drew Dahlman deal got a B minus, and the other ones were trades. Oh, the trade for Tooney got a B. So no, I don't think that they went crazy grading the Bears moves. I agree with Jonah Jackson being a D grade for the Bears. I mean, he just hasn't played well recently. And if the Rams are getting rid of a guy, you always have to question that. If Sean McVay's moving on, you have to question that. So they're pretty harsh on the Rams. A lot of times with grades, you'll see this with draft grades where nobody wants to get 1,000 tweets that tell them to go jump off a bridge. So they usually just give the worst grade is like a C plus and the best grade is an A, and everyone does well because they just don't want to hear about it. ESPN did not approach it this way. And Seth Walder did not approach it this way. He was fearless about the responses, but the Bears got criticized pretty harshly here too. Steven says the best case scenario for a trade down might be Dart and someone like New York or Cleveland. Whoever doesn't get Russell Wilson wanted the 5th year option. Oh yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Oh, right. So if someone wants to draft Jackson Dart and they want the 5th year option, that they trade up with the Vikings, I could see that. I don't know if Jackson Dart is actually a high draft pick or not. There are not very many great quarterback options in this year's draft, and maybe that's one of them. Digit says JJ was working on his mechanics when he went out with the injury. It stands to reason that with his immobility, he will now resume mechanics work, an area of development that is a big concern to me. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that OTA practice, that first OTA practice will really be something to see where he stands. But I don't want to overreact to it. Overreact in football with the Vikings, with quarterbacks and knees. Who would ever do that? Who would ever overreact to things like that? So to your point, that's the long road for JJ McCarthy. But because he doesn't have to play a football game, we're almost at April. So yeah, April 1, May 2, June 3, July 4, and he will start practices on like July 24th. So 5 months from now, that's a long time to get back what he was learning from last year. And he understands it. He just has to make his leg do it. He understands it now. Last year, he was having to learn what it is. Just what do I do? How do I take a snap? I mean, it is so detailed in the NFL that they changed how JJ McCarthy stood there in the shotgun. Like, that's how detailed this stuff has to be because it's 2.5 seconds and the ball comes out. So it's take the snap and and the ball has to come out. So he's got to get those mechanics back. And I think that's a reasonable concern and something we'll be watching for. But I also don't want to see a bad OTA practice and be like, oh my gosh, he's screwed. he'll never do it because he's got 5 months to figure it out, and he's going to work at it. Rob says, during COVID, I analyzed all the quarterbacks drafted since 2000. Love that for you. It's a good project to do. 50% of first rounders do fine. Yeah. It's a coin flip. But the thing about that stat is you can push that needle with Justin Jefferson, with Jordan Addison, with KOC, with TJ Hawkinson. That's what they're betting on, is that it might be 50% overall, but what percentage with an elite receiver, a coach of the year? I mean, I don't know if there's ever been like a guy maybe there is in year 2. Patrick Mahomes had Tyreek Hill and Andy Reid. He is Patrick Mahomes, so you can't really compare too much. But how about even Josh Allen by year 3? Stephon Diggs, he's got pretty good coaching. I think Brian Daboll was the offensive coordinator there. So the opportunity is there because of the circumstances that they have laid out for him to be very good. Noah says, and of course it wouldn't be football talk if we weren't in March with not using the word fired, but I know what you're saying here. Noah says, even if JJ were to bust, I wouldn't want KOC or Kwesi Adofo-Mensah fired. They've done everything else well. Quarterback is a crapshoot. Yeah, it's so unfair and unforgiving of a league when you could build a team this good with players this good and make good moves, hit on free agents, have great coaching, and still have the potential that it doesn't go right. I mean, that is how harsh the NFL can be just because of one person. You put together 2 through 52 and you feel great about it, and then one person goes wrong, it can take it all apart. But when you've seen Kirk play well in this system, when you've seen Sam Darnold play this well, the percentage isn't 50% with McCarthy, right? Health, though, is always a problem, but it's higher than that. This isn't the Norv Turner, whatever the heck he was doing with his offense with Teddy Bridgewater in 2015, and they still got to the playoffs. This is a coach who has elevated his quarterbacks in a very unique way. But you're right. I mean, when we always want to talk about firing everybody. I think the structure of this thing is sound. That's the most important part. The structure of this thing is sound, of how they make decisions, how they coach the team, the culture they create. But we know this. If it goes bad, all that stuff goes bad too. Wentz is from Bismarck, North Dakota. Do we claim them? There's parts of North and South Dakota that I feel like are mostly Vikings fans and kind of are viewed very like we're kind of the same. I don't know if Bismarck is on the list there. I don't know my Dakota geography. I actually don't know a whole lot about anything outside of football. So, but you could tell me if we claim Bismarck or not. Scott says QB2 is a meaningless discussion. All he needs to do is hand off in garbage time. Anything serious happens to McCarthy and the Wilfs will demand trading for Bradford 2.0. It matters to some extent in that quarterbacks get hurt all the time. And you don't want a season to just go down the drain because of that. You want to still have a season if your guy gets hurt for half the year. That's the key. I mean, like even Cincinnati, when Burrow got hurt and Jake Browning almost made the playoffs, they had still had an exciting season. Your season is over if your quarterback gets hurt for the whole year, for sure. But Joe Flacco makes the playoffs. You can still have an exciting season. You can still feel good about what the franchise did that year at least. Or you can keep yourself in a race for when the starting quarterback comes back. So it does mean something. It's just that we're down to all options where you go, I can't form a very hot opinion about Tannehill versus Wentz. Okay, this is the real discussion here of the offseason. With Andrew DePaula's age, when do we need a new long snapper? That's a great question. I have no idea. I don't know if the wear and tear gets to a long snapper. I don't think they have to do, I don't tell him I said that, but I don't think they have to do a whole lot other than snap it, right? So as long as you can still, you should be fine. How old is he? Like 38? He is really dang good at his job, though. It's insane. It's insane how consistent he is. Anthony says, surprise first pick. It'd be a wide receiver would, I think, surprise the world. I'm getting on that bus because I like it. I like the idea of Luther Burden or Matthew Golden and having everyone go, what are the Vikings doing with another wide receiver? They already have wide receivers. I would love that. I would love that. And then they would just throw to him and he'd be awesome. And then they would be better. Like that would be the more I can, if it's a weapon, I'm good with it. The biggest surprise would be like a tight end, but they're not going to do that. They have two good tight ends. Wide receiver would be the one that most shocks the world. Edge rusher would be like, what? That's the only position I can't see them doing. But if it's wide receiver, I'm still really good with that. There would be a lot of shock, but if JJ McCarthy can throw to the human being that they draft, success. Running back would be the one that would be kind of ludicrous, but everything else is on the table. That's what makes it so fun. Randall says, Ravel, Hairston, Amos, Thomas at 37, 30. I assume you're draft simming. Yeah, that's what I mean about the corners like that. If you're, by the way, if you are doing a draft sim while listening / watching the show, I mean, that's like, we need to hand out badges or neck rolls or something. Like you get a neck roll for that, my friend. Like Rob, who did the study from 2000 with the quarterback, like you get a neck roll for tonight. You get a neck roll. That's hardcore. But your point about the corners is that the expectations are a lot of the corners are going to go in the early second round. Here we go. This is a neck roll level. Oh, the long snapper's a neck roll level question, and so is this. Son of Beavers, do you think the Vikings bring in another punter to work out? I mean, once again, if it's March 24th and you're like, do they need another punter? Neck roll. Neck roll for you, Son of Beavers. Yes, I do. I do think that they will do that. I think they will bring in competition just like they did last year. This is a good point from Hunter. Vikings fans have a skewed perception about backup quarterbacks because of 2017, 98, and what other backups have done against the Vikings. No, I agree with that. It is a myth. I looked that up one time. I went through, I don't know, a bunch of years of data of backups versus the Vikings. That's a myth. You just really remember the ones where it went wrong. But their win percentage against the Vikings is no different from anybody else. Steve says, just complete the O-line and take left guard Tyler Booker at 24 in a trade down situation. He's not a great mover, but he can move people. I was listening to Sam and Steve the other day on Check the Mic, and they were talking about how guard has the least correlation between their NFL combine and actual success in the league. So if they like Booker, go with Booker. He is a big, giant human being. This is Jade says, can Kwesi draft if he's not drafting for need? I think that Kwesi has not drafted enough players for us to really say, can he draft or not? I'm sure that over a long period of time, some teams with some leaders have very bad processes and it doesn't work out. That 2022 draft is biblical. I mean, that is like the worst draft ever, but also pretty much the same results as Rick Spielman's 2016, right after his 2015. So I want to see a lot more. There's a difference between does he need to hit on it and is there any real control over whether the guys work out? I just got that question yesterday about why guys go bust, and I ran through like 12 reasons. I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, but in this case, it's the best player on the board. That I would say they did that with Jordan Addison, the best player on the board when they took him. We also really can't, when we say, he can't draft at all, he did get a wide receiver that if he was a free agent today would make $20 million. That does kind of matter. And a starting linebacker who plays 800 snaps and gets sacks and pressures in undrafted free agency, like that kind of matters. I'm not saying 2022 didn't go wrong. It's just that they have drafted players. Just not like a huge number of them. Harold Fannin, maybe undrafted free agency if he doesn't get picked, but Frat Boys Inc. That's funny. Says Zabel is more valuable because he can move to any position on the field. Yeah, I like that about him. That he could play center, or he could play guard, or he could play guard and then move to center, that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, Steve's talking about the history of players from NDSU. I'm not concerned about that. Like you could do that with any university. You could do any university. You could be like, oh, Ohio State quarterbacks can't play until CJ Stroud. And then suddenly they can play. I'm not worried about that. You have a bunch of people who are supposed to evaluate these guys. Let them do their jobs with that. And if they like what they look like at the Senior Bowl and their tape, I mean, there's been guys to come from those universities that are fine. It's going to need some development though, and that's why you keep Blake Brandel. All right. Well, I told intern Clay to keep his eyes out. I thought tonight I was like, I don't know. Are Vikings fans excited tonight? Like, there's no real news. They didn't even bring in like some random free agent or something. And guess what? Neck rolls for all. All of you get neck rolls for a great conversation tonight, stemming off those ESPN grades. So I really appreciate that. But now it is time to welcome in for Clay's Corner, intern Clay, University of Pennsylvania, former football player and innovative question asker. I don't know, whatever else you want to be known for. What is going on, Clay? How are you?
I'm good. I really enjoyed all the neck roll worthy questions in here today. There was a ton of good stuff in here. For such a quiet day, it was a pleasant shock.
Kicker, punter, and long snapper on the show.
Right.
But if you still have questions, throw them in. I will mix in the questions. Clay has 5 that he has come up with for me. So what do you got? Where do you want to start, Clay?
Yep. So the first one I got is that the Vikings brought in a lot of key additions this offseason. And I just wanted to ask you, which one of them do you think needs to make the biggest impact to ensure that the Vikings have another successful season?
I guess my answer would probably be Will Fries. Because if Will Fries is no better than Blake Brandel was last year, then you're probably getting a lot of the same results. Now, based on where he was headed in his career before he got hurt, it looked a lot better than that. And his 2023 was better than that. But if he's sort of coming off this leg injury and is just a guy and not an impact player at the price they paid for him, then that's going to be still that bugaboo that it's been for such a long time. It's not going to be the driving force to the running game that we want it to be and all that sort of stuff. I also think if you have a good guard in this world, because there's so many good defensive tackles, because there's so many good defensive minds that are sending those blitzes, that it can have a huge impact now to have a guy there who solidifies the interior of that line. So I think that I might actually pair them together, that Kelly and Fries, when you combine them with Darrisaw, O'Neal, and whoever they put at left guard, this might be the first impact offensive line that I've covered in my career covering the Vikings. That's what you're looking for. There's only like 5 offensive lines that have a serious positive impact. Then there's about 15 that are hanging on for dear life. And then there's about 10 more that just can't play football at all and ruin everything. And you want to be in that 5. They can be in that 5 if Will Fries is great. If Will Fries is just sort of, he's there, then it's not going to be that way. So I think he has an opportunity, the rare guard, to swing the offense in quite a positive way. Who did you have?
I like the offensive line. I think I'm just so confident in them, in their film, that I feel like they'll be fine, especially with the tackles they're surrounded by and their offensive coach. So I feel like I'm just more confident in them. I feel like right now, like today, I'm looking at Isaiah Rodgers, which is weird because there were so many more like big moves, but he's like the number 2 corner on this team right now. And I think I'm going to lean more towards the defensive tackles. I think Jonathan Allen and Hargrave are probably going to be more important because I see the Vikings going out and getting a corner in the draft. But if they stayed the same, I think I would go with Isaiah Rodgers. But I think they'll get a corner, and then Jonathan Allen, he's going to be, well, him and Hargrave, but I think Allen with the more expensive contract is going to be the one we really look at to see the impact he makes.
Rodgers was the guy that when he signed, I said, like, this could turn out to be a big signing that we don't think about at all, because his numbers are really good and he could win that job. He could play a lot. We are expecting Mekhi Blackmon to come back from the ACL injury. There's going to be a battle there for a position. They might draft one in the first round. I could still see them, or trade back and draft a corner. I could still see that, but it might be one of those where, and I've talked about this through the years about how it's a weak linked system in the secondary. Your secondary is only as good as your worst player. And if your worst player is actually good, And that's the area where they needed to get a little stronger from Shaq Griffin, from Stephon Gilmore. That could have a serious impact. I would probably go with Allen or Hargrave, whoever's going to play more. So if Allen's going to play more, then I would go with him as having the potential biggest impact, because if they don't need to blitz all the time, they can be a better defense than they were last year. And looking at who they're playing for quarterbacks next year, they need to be a better defense overall to get the same results. They can't just roll out the same stuff they had last year, and interior pressure is really where that starts.
Yeah.
Uh, Rob says he thinks Jordan Mason is the biggest one that could have an impact. I mean, that could be touchdowns. It could be actually getting first downs on 3rd and short and not having to throw down the field because of Jordan Mason. Adding a toughness element to it, where this team just was not really known for that last year, I think was important. And Jordan Mason's a big part of that.
Yeah, I agree. And going back to Jonathan Allen with Brian Flores, I feel like everybody talks about his creativeness and all the blitzes he sends at quarterbacks. But if you have pressure coming from the interior, it allows him to be even more flexible and may not have to blitz as much and still get the pressure. And it could just take this defense to a whole nother level. So if those D tackles work out, or even if just one of them work out, I think it'll be a huge impact for this team.
Son of a Beaver says biggest impact will be tight end 3. She's trying for more neck rolls. I see what you're doing. I see what you're doing. But yeah, feel free to answer that question in the comments. Which one of these guys could have the biggest impact? And I wonder about like a wins above replacement, like what's worth the most in terms of value. A running back is not going to be that most of the time unless they're Saquon Barkley. It probably is a defensive tackle, would likely be if you were doing, because PFF does have a wins above replacement stat that they do not always share publicly. I think they do once a year with the free agents, but they don't show everybody's. And defensive tackle is pretty far up there on the list, I think. And I also think the way it impacts every single down for a quarterback, like you have to think about that interior pressure all the time. So I would go the one that has the potential to be the most disruptive and have the most wins above replacement value is the defensive tackle position.
Yeah.
All right, what's next?
So next up, Jameis Winston, backup quarterback. He signed with the Giants on a 2-year deal. And I feel like he's such a unique player because he's so bad, and yet we all love him still. So if you had to pick another quarterback in NFL history who's the most comparable to him, like who would you pick?
So the funny thing is that Nick Mullins played just like him, and we don't think of those guys being at all similar. And yet the first name that comes to mind is Nick Mullins for me, just because he threw so many interceptions and for so many yards all the time. But that's a very Vikings specific reference, because you would never expect Nick Mullins to be like him. I would go with Vinny Testaverde historically, which is one that is a deep throwback, I know, to the 90s. But Vinny Testaverde finished his career 4th all time in interceptions, but also had some awesome years. And I think that if Jameis Winston would play a lot, he would have that like wide variance between, yeah, he's throwing a ton of, like one year, Vinny Testaverde threw 33 touchdowns, 19 picks, and went 4-12. Like that's kind of Jameis Winston-y. Just like lots of passing, lots of picks, and sometimes it's fun and sometimes it's not. Kerry Collins might be another one that's a throwback there, where you could see under the right circumstances it working, but he's never really had a lot of that. He went 7-3, I think, as a starter for New Orleans. And aside from that, I mean, Tampa Bay had a good team, and he went 8-8, throwing like 30 touchdowns and 30 picks. Those are a couple that come to mind for me. Big arms that just throw a ton of interceptions. What did you have?
Yeah, I was trying to think of like tier 2 gunslingers because I can't put him on like the level as like the Favres or the other guys where it's like, yeah, he made a lot of dumb plays, but he still won and had a good career. Like, so I had to think of people who are just not that great. And someone that hits close to home, Jay Cutler. It's like I thought he had a cannon, and sometimes you would see him throw the ball, and it's like, wow, like is he actually a good quarterback? Like that's crazy. But then the other like 90% of the time he's throwing it straight to the defense. So it's kind of hard to stick with him and cheer him on. But I remember growing up watching him play, and he would give me like nightmares because I'm like, what is he? How many times is he going to give the ball up this game?
Brett says Ryan Fitzpatrick. You know what I think Jameis is? And Fitzpatrick was like that too. He'd throw for 1,000,000 yards, million interceptions. I think that Jameis is kind of the worst version of what you're talking about. He's like the bad Jay Cutler, except for all the time. He's the bad Carson Palmer all the time. Like Carson Palmer had a year where he threw 26 touchdowns, 20 picks, and went 7-9. And he also had amazing years where he threw 35 touchdowns and 11 picks with Arizona late in his career. But he was kind of an interception machine. Let me just search this. From 2010 to 2013, he threw 85 touchdowns and 72 picks, Carson Palmer. So he was kind of an interception machine for a really long run there, and then found the home in Arizona. But I like the way that you frame it, like second tier type of gunslinger. How about the bad Geno Smith, the bad Sam Darnold? Like that's kind of exactly what he is. What I'll never understand is why people love the guy. I mean, I think it's because he brings a lot of energy and stuff, and maybe they're comfortable with forgetting what happened in college. But even just as a player, why I think maybe entertainment value. It's like if he doesn't play for your team, you're like, Jameis is on. This is going to be fun. But if he plays for your team, you're going to absolutely hate life with him as your quarterback.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like former like high end draft picks who were bust that we still root for. And it's like not really a lot. Normally they're just known for being that bust or the disappointing pick. So the fact that we're over here cheering him on, looking forward to his quotes, or at least I look forward to his pregame quotes, even though he might not be playing. So he's just such a funny player to me.
He is kind of a throwback in this way because nobody throws picks anymore. Like it's just not how like it used to be. Even 20 years ago, 15 years ago, you'd see guys with 20 picks all the time. You just don't see that. It's like there were years where Matthew Stafford won like 4 games, that kind of version of him, but he's never had the high end. So he's just kind of always the bad version.
Yeah, always the bad version, not where you want to be, Jameis, but
Exactly.
it's all right.
Good luck, New York. I mean,
Yeah.
Is anyone more screwed than the New York Giants?
It's bad when you go from Cleveland to the Giants. It's like if he doesn't end it here, he's going to be on the Jets next. So it's it's going to be bad. Anyway, for my next question, as I was looking through all the NFL rumors and news to try and come up with all these questions, I was thinking, what if there was no reporting in the offseason? Like imagine you just show up game 1 and that's where you learn about your team's new free agency moves, who they drafted, who they traded. How would you feel about that? Do you think it would make the league better or worse?
So there's this is something I think about all the time. I mean, first of all, for my purposes, like look at our audience right now, and there's nothing that happened today. Like this is awesome, and thank you everyone for loving footballs. This is why we're throwing neck rolls. Like the passion, the 365 passion for football is so awesome, and I love it. It allows me to just talk about this all the time. I mean, I think maybe before the internet was as big, before we had live streaming like this, in a local market, like you're in the Philadelphia area, I'm in Minnesota, like they would have just turned their attention away from the Vikings, and the local media would have focused on the Twins all summer long and the Wild in the playoffs, and you wouldn't have heard much from the Vikings for months and months. No one would be talking about them, and now we are, which also leads to some downside to that, which is that every single thing, and I named my Friday mailbag Mystery Vikings Theater, because like sometimes we just have too much information. Like and we'll see when it comes to Kwesi and what he has to say about his contract and all that. But like we know every player's contract. We know every single draft analysis of every single player. We know the last guy on the roster. We know all this stuff. And sometimes it can be a little bit information overload where we're obsessing maybe too much over who the backup quarterback is or looking for I mean, because you have so many media outlets that are covering it all the time, you're just looking for drama all the time. And we've definitely seen that with the Vikings coverage over the last few years, where it's like anything that might even be hinted at behind the scenes is this huge story, even if it doesn't come to fruition. So that could be a little frustrating and would be like kind of nice in some ways. but I also love training camp and love going to practices. So maybe if you said at training camp, that would be actually really fun if there was a 24-hour NFL offseason reveal show that started the first day of training camp and your team, Cincinnati Bengals, signed your wide receivers. Wow, they go crazy, right? Yeah, like, what? We did what? Yeah, that would be pretty funny. Uh, I like the way that it's structured now because it just is so many opportunities to talk about it. I'm going to go cover an OTA practice in a few weeks here. And I guarantee you the numbers are going to be great for that because everyone wants to know how's JJ look. I like that part of it, but it would be very different and fun in its own way if we all had to like find out what had been going on behind the scenes for months about their new teams. That week would be the most fun week in football for sure.
Yeah, like I love talking ball year round, and I could do it all the time. And obviously, we do it for work, and it would definitely be something to think about for that part. But just as a pure fan, it would be like another Super Bowl. Like I think it would end up being one of the biggest sports events in the world. Just there would be so many eyes on it. And imagine like when Tom Brady went to Tampa Bay. It would like, oh my god, he just runs out of the tunnel, hits the fist pump, and the oh yeah, or whatever he says, and it everyone would just be like, wow, like, this is real. This is actually real. And I don't know. I just think the drama would be crazy, but I don't know. I do like talking ball year round, so I'm cool with the way things are, but it would be really interesting to see.
There is a major change that's happened in the way we consume football though with so much knowledge of what goes on in the offseason where sometimes I've felt like during the season fans can't wait for it to be over to talk about the offseason again. I last year I remember at the near the bye week I think I was like, okay, I'll allow future questions tonight and tonight only for like future offseason. It was the most questions I had all year because a lot of it is so interesting and you could play along at home. And that's maybe the favorite part. It's like we all can get on overthecap.com. We could draft sim. That's why I say we when we have these discussions, because all the fans that are here tonight asking questions are so knowledgeable. Like you guys know as much as I do about this team. And so we can have this conversation, but where you get into the Vikings playing the Las Vegas Raiders and we're going down this rabbit hole of like how their defensive tackle is going to match up with your center or something. It's like not the same of where like convivial element where we can all play along together, which I think is really fun about the off season. But I also think what you're talking about would be an amazing thing if they did it one year. Like nothing gets out until the last minute. A lot of insiders would not have their jobs anymore. Mr. Mayor says, how much do you think the media coverage affects the team's decision making on free agency and the draft? I don't think really at all, but they have owners, and owners consume media. And I think the Vikings owners are very good at not letting what's being said on the outside impact what's being said to them by the general manager and the head coach, who they're communicating with the most. I think it definitely impacts like some teams that have absolutely crazy owners. I definitely think that that's the case. But as far as this team goes, I don't think much. I mean, they're clearly more, I would say they're more aware of what media is saying about them than ever before. But I don't think that they like read, oh, the Vikings need a defensive tackle. And they're like, oh yeah, we, you're right about that. Most of the time it's us telling you or us all figuring out together the same thing that they already know. You know what I mean? Like, hey, it seems like the Vikings need a guard in free agency. Like, this isn't the shocker to them. But, what they do at quarterback, I don't know. It's hard to say because I think after what happened with Darnold, everyone was comfortable with moving on. But if Darnold had played differently in those playoff games and there was Stephen A. Smith and Mike Greenberg and NFL Network all saying they have to bring back Sam Darnold, would the owners have been a little more on the side of, yeah, a lot of these experts are saying, we can anybody could say they're not influenced by media, but if the owners are watching the TV shows and stuff like that, of course there's going to be some level of influence there.
Yeah, I hope my owner doesn't pay attention to what the fans are saying. Like, what's the saying? If you listen to the fans, you'll be sitting with them or something like that. So, yeah, it's hard. It's like you said, like they already know what they're gonna do weeks, months, maybe sometimes years before like we know what's going on. So yeah, that's a tough line to to stand on. But
King Dickum says, remember waiting impatiently for pre NFL preseason magazines. Oh yes. Oh, I did the same thing. Yep. This is old guy time. Old guy talk here, Clay. Vinny Testaverde came up,
what's a magazine?
and but no, truly, the NFL preview Sports Illustrated, they'd predict all the teams' records, and I would keep it, see how far off they were at the end of the season. I would read every single one of those from start to finish. And I can't say at that point that I knew what was going on. There would be my local newspaper had a transaction wire thing, and I didn't have ESPN. I grew up without cable. So I just had to get the newspaper, and the Sports Illustrated would be how I got everything, which is so different from getting it from Adam Schefter instantly right now. But that there was something that was really fun about, like, you get the new Madden game and you get the magazine and you fix the roster and everything else. There was something fun about that. Yes, Steven, I will be traveling to the owners' meetings this week, and we'll see what we get out of that. That's always fun. That's conversation with Mark Wilf. So, I mean, it's been a pretty big offseason for spending Mark Wilf's money, Mark and Ziggy. So usually there's a conversation with Mark, and there is a 7:45 Eastern breakfast with Kevin O'Connell that we'll all be at. And that's tough on everybody. I don't drink, but like, that means 6:45 Central Time, waking up to go ask the head coach questions. I mean, that's pretty tough. That's kind of a grind. I know it's going to be tough. I'll be in West Palm Beach. I have to get up early. Feel bad for me. Anyway, King Dickum says, I remember paying attention to ESPN draft coverage, whatever year it was. Trent Dilfer was drafted. So that's the thing. I didn't even watch the draft. I actually listened to the draft in the first round on the radio. I would just have it on because I didn't have cable and it wasn't on any major networks. So I would just listen to it. And I remember when Randy Moss was drafted, they were criticizing his pants. And I was like, man, I don't know anything about this Moss guy. I hope he just kills the league. And so I always, that's like my early connection to Moss. So I got Madden 99 and I wanted to play with Moss and kill it with Moss because I was so annoyed with the people talking about how he's wearing his pants. So anyway, and I smoked a pipe while I told that story to young Clay.
Yeah, like they get on me for calling you old, but you kind of do it to yourself, man. I gotta be real.
Part of that is I think that NFL history and talking about it is fun. Like, and as you go along in your life and you're like, yeah, man, that Mahomes, I'll tell you, like there's having seen multiple generations of players and seen how coverage changes and how we consume it changes and how my thoughts and feelings about the game changes. I like that part. I like talking, and plus I think a lot of my audience is like the same age as me or older. So, I mean, maybe our YouTube success recently is bringing in more people from your age bracket. Anyway, what's next question?
Okay, so the next one, so the Vikings had the 24th pick. Imagine they had the choice between a 2,000-yard rusher, a defensive tackle who's guaranteed to get 10 sacks, or a kicker who never missed from 65 and in. Who are you taking?
So I got the first round pick, and a football wizard from the future comes down and tells me, if you pick these three players, this one will turn into a 2,000-yard rusher. This one will turn into a 10-sack defensive tackle, and this kicker will never miss from 65 and in. I mean, I think the kicker would probably be really valuable, but kicking is so good these days. I mean, we saw from Will Reichard last year, before he got banged up, he made literally every kick. So that guy kind of exists for them. The answer is probably not the kicker at this point in the league where kicking's going. Yeah, I'll be watching some Rutgers game or something. They'll run out a kicker. Here's Northern Iowa's kicker, and the guy bangs it through from 58. You're like, what is going on here? Kicking has been solved. Everyone has figured out how to kick at this point. So I'm going to say no to the kicker. I think I would go with the 10-sack defensive tackle, in part because Saquon Barkley runs for 2,000 last year and averages almost 6 yards a carry. The previous year with the Giants, he averaged like 4 yards a carry. I think a lot of the success, and it's not to say that him running away from people is not him, but a lot of the success of running backs is based on what you can do for them and how you play. So if you have a running quarterback and the best offensive line in football, that's going to result in 2,000 yards. But if you don't have those things, you're probably not going to get that out of the guy. Although I guess I'm being guaranteed that a 2,000-yard runner is pretty darn valuable. I think I would still take the 10-sack defensive tackle. How many guys get 10 sacks at DT? Like 3 a year?
Yeah, not many.
I think I'll go with that. No one wants to play against a 10-sack defensive tackle.
Yeah, I think initially I was drawn to the kicker because you really just get a past midfield and you got an automatic 3. So, but then I was thinking about it. If you're not the best offense or if you don't have the weapons, like one, getting to midfield might be a problem and scoring touchdowns might be a problem. And games are not won and lost by field goals most of the time. Normally, if you see a team go up 9-0 early, it doesn't just based off field goals, it's like the game's not over. It's still a young game. So if it would be like an automatic 15 points about every game, but if you have a 2,000-yard rusher, it is, especially I was thinking for the Vikings, like on this team, like Will Reichard is a good enough kicker to where I don't think we need the magic 65-yard leg. I think the offense is good enough to get into position to score. So I don't think they need a cheap way out. But if you throw a 2,000-yard rusher next to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and all these other weapons, JJ McCarthy's going to have the easiest job in the world. So that's how I view it.
Now, yeah, I guess I have always said anything that helps JJ McCarthy is what you want to go for. 2,000-yard rusher is going to be pretty darn valuable. And we're assuming that it's a high yards per carry rate. And I don't know if any team has struggled that's had a 2,000-yard rusher. I mean,
can't imagine.
Jamal Lewis, Chris Johnson, Eric Dickerson, Adrian Peterson. Well, Adrian Peterson's team still won 10 games, even when they couldn't throw the ball at all. Steve has a question for you. Says, who is the only starting player in the NFL that came from your University of Pennsylvania?
Is Jay Watt a starter? Justin Watson, receiver. He played for the Chiefs. I think he's on the Texans now.
Is that who you're thinking of, Steve?
Is that what we got, Steve?
Could be.
Justin Watson.
Beavers wants the kicker. I understand the kicker. I mean,
it's hard to pass on that,
especially because so many games are close within one score. Like, all I got to do is get to the 45-yard line and I just win the game. So, but I mean, all of those are good. The defensive tackle, that's not who Steve was referring to. Okay, Steve, who were you referring to? There is a former Viking. Oh, Greg Van Rotten. How about that? The offensive guard.
Ooh. I did not know Greg.
There is a former Viking from University of Pennsylvania, caught a game-winning touchdown in 1989, and I'm forgetting his name right now. But there's some connections. When you chose Penn, your odds of making the NFL were not high, I think, based on
the
you pipeline.
You kind of take that into account when you make the decision. Yeah.
Education. Yeah. Whatever. Anyway. Okay. So what's next? How many got left? One or two?
I have one more left.
Okay.
And it's another March Madness theme question because 'tis the season. So what if the NFL eliminated conferences and divisions, and for playoffs, they did a March Madness style tournament for all 32 teams, and the seeding would be based on how the regular season goes? How would you feel about that? Would it make the playoffs better, worse? What are your thoughts?
So rather than playing like the week 17, 18, instead, you would just start the playoff tournament, basically. And your first round of the playoffs is who was the worst team in the NFL this year? The Tennessee Titans. Yeah. The Tennessee Titans versus the Kansas City Chiefs is the first game. And then how many rounds would that take? You'd have a 32, Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final 4. So it'd be 5 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the same number of games for the Super Bowl champ, right? They play basically the same number of games because you play 4. You can play as many as 4 playoff games Usually it's 3 if you
Yeah.
have the bye, but it can
Mhm.
be 4. So you'd have to play one extra. Maybe we would have to work in like a first round bye or something and cut it down. But I don't think it's the craziest thing I've ever heard. They would never go to it, but how insane would it be though? Where you're in the playoffs and you are the, let's say, 10th best team in the league and you got to play the 20th best team in the league. Maybe some team got their quarterback hurt and they could go on a run. Or like think about the Cincinnati Bengals last year. Would you have wanted to play the Cincinnati Bengals at the end of last year? No way, not the way that they were playing. And so some teams could get hot and they could go through the playoffs and all of a sudden you're the 20th best regular season team. Maybe that would be a reason not to want to do it, is that it would make just like so much less sense. But then again, if you end up with a team that's the 20th best team that has to fight through a bunch of really great teams to get there, that would be an incredible story. I mean, I like when we were talking about the playoff format the other day and how you can win 14 games and somehow be a 4 seed. Like, I don't know, a March Madness tournament makes more sense than that. Maybe if they added 2 more teams in the NFL in London and Quebec or something, I don't know, then they they could give 2 teams a first round bye or something. But that would, I think it would be a really crazy and insane and super fun type of tournament. I don't know if they'll ever do this because they want the regular season to matter, but it would matter for seeding so much. Where if you're the and look, we see so many of these week 18 games that mean nothing. It's mostly a throwaway week outside. Like what, Detroit and the Vikings were the one game that mattered in week 18 all of last year. So you would have then you'd blow out week 17 and 18 and everything would matter after that. Coaches could save their jobs. Players could get contracts off of a hot tournament run, just like they get drafted. I mean, or you could end up with the best teams just, going and winning, but making them play all the way through week 18 and then beyond. I kind of like it. Roger, what do you think? I think teams would hate it. I think teams would hate it because the 1 seeds, they want that bye week. But
Yeah.
I'd rather see them play. I'd
Yeah.
rather see them just keep playing.
I think it would be one of the most special and electrifying tournaments out there. And I can only think of the atmosphere there. Like one of my favorite parts about the game is just hearing the crowd go crazy. And like every single game would have like Super Bowl atmosphere. And I think it would be really fun, but I'm also conflicted because yes, the regular season does matter for seeding, but also if you're a team like the Eagles and say you have all the confidence in the world, what if you just sit your starters for like a good half of the season and then just come into the playoffs completely healthy? Like everybody makes it. So I love how the majority, I mean, the last few weeks, there's some games that don't matter, but the majority of football games in the NFL, they all matter and really anyone can win. There's so many close games, so many one score games, and it's truly like a coin toss pretty much every Sunday. So I love how every game matters. That's my biggest thing with the NBA. It's like 82 games, and it's like I'm not watching all of these. Like the players don't even care about all of these. Like what? So that's a big thing that I like about the NFL and would like to keep. But that tournament would be insane.
You're right that it might reduce some teams' desperation, but it kind of already does anyway with the fact that you could sit players in week 18 like the Rams did. I mean, the Rams, it was a massive factor that was not talked about at all. And I probably was negligent on this myself, not talking about it enough leading up to Vikings and Rams, that the Rams sat their starters and they could just come to that game super healthy. And the Vikings had to go to Detroit and get all beat up and then, end up going and playing a really physical team that was fully healthy. It would be, yeah, maybe there's some way to incentivize winning divisions or whatever else that would still be involved in it. But if it was just a pure 32 team tournament, starts day one, I think it would be insane. It would be super fun. We'd be talking nonstop matchups as the season went along, and getting higher seeds means you get to play worse teams, which is something that I think everybody would be fighting for. So, are you enjoying the NCAA tournament? It's been a lot of chalk on both the men's and the women's side.
Yeah, I gotta confess, this has been the first year where I didn't make a bracket. Haven't really paid too much attention. I'm just not the biggest college basketball person. I kind of felt bad about myself for not participating originally, but I don't know. I'm not going to force myself. So
Well, I am very invested on the women's side, but on the men's side, very, very casual. I didn't make a bracket. I used to make brackets, and then I would just get mad when they busted. So, you know, why do I need that in my life? On the women's side, the best player in the college world, Paige Beckers, is from Minnesota. And also, my wife being a women's basketball broadcaster, I watch a ton of women's basketball throughout the year. So even just the game that happened earlier tonight with Maryland and Alabama, holy cow, was one of the best games you'll ever see in your life. So both tournaments, though, I don't mind that they're chalk. I don't mind that you get to the Sweet 16 and it's just great teams playing great teams. I don't always love when there's a Cinderella and they get there and then they just get stomped out and you're like, well, okay, that was cute, but I didn't need Fairleigh Dickinson to win and then just get crushed. I want to see the best basketball as we go on, and I will forget about the ones that don't matter at all. So anyway, well, great stuff, Clay. I appreciate your time and patience with so many great questions that were asked by Vikings fans tonight. We'll definitely be live again. I'm thinking, trying to plan it out because middle of the week we're supposed to hear from the general manager. So of course I want to do a recap show of that. I might do it out there though on Wednesday and then run it for you guys Wednesday night. Thursday though, we'll definitely be here. Guaranteed Thursday, guaranteed for breaking news, maybe Wednesday, depending on if we get anything really interesting from the GM that you guys want to react to. And then at the end of the weekend, I'll be headed down to the owners meetings and I'm sure we'll get a lot from that as well. So thanks for your time, Clay. We will see you soon on Thursday. And I appreciate everybody taking the time. This was a really fun chat. I expect nothing less from you guys. We'll have a lot of fun conversation leading up to the draft. Chris Trapasso draft show is going to be worth checking out every single week. We'll do more draft simulations, and there's a lot of positions that they could look at. So we'll have a lot to discuss. Thank you again, everybody, for watching / listening, and we will see you again very soon. Football.